Well, hi, welcome back, everyone. I really needed to do this video really quick before the this bullshit makes its way all over the internet. I read an article. This is so weird. So, I was reading like all these articles from, I suppose you could call like more leftist centrist media, but after a while, it just started only giving me and recommending me right-wing media outlets. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what led me to find this article, which I thought was really strange. So the article itself, where is it? Was the original one that I read was done by, where is this guy? Long blank out. So originally I read this article from the Washington Examiner, a journalist named Matt Lamb. And the interesting thing is that so this guy, he this was originally published as an opinion piece, and the title of it is 40% of Brown University students say they are LGBT, suggesting social contagion, and there's a reason why it is. Damn fucking lawn mowing.
Sorry about that, guys. There's not much I can do about that.
If I get enough empty space of that, and I might be able to cut it out in the audio editor. So this is partly why it was considered a opinion piece, is suggest social contagion, and there's a lot of bullshit when it comes to the claim.
New survey data from Brown University's student newspaper provides further evidence that the increase in LGBT identification is driven by social pressures. The latest data show that between 2010 and 2023, identification as LGBTQ+ has almost tripled among the student body at Brown, from 14% in 2010 saying they were not heterosexual to 38% now. The Herald's Spring 2023 poll found that 38% of students do not identify as straight, over 5 times the national rate, the Brown Daily Herald reported. Over the past decade, LGBTQ+ identification has increased across the nation, with especially sharp growth at Brown. Biden may buck bipartisan vote to keep mortgage overhaul in place. Other sexual orientations have seen massive increases. Since fall 2010, Brown's LGBTQ+ population has expanded considerably. The gay or lesbian population has increased by 26%, and the percentage of students identifying as bisexual has increased by 232%, the student newspaper reported. Students identifying as other sexual orientations within the LGBTQ+ community have increased by 793%. The idea of LGBT identification as a social contagion is one that continues to draw criticism among academics. For example, the head of an academic journal that published a paper that supported the theory of rapid onset gender dysphoria faced a cancellation attempt, along with the Northwestern University professor who wrote the paper. Coincidentally, Dr. Lisa Littman, who popularized the idea of rapid-onset gender dysphoria, once taught at Brown University before being forced out over the controversy. Dr. Littman argued that some girls who identified as transgender were doing so due to peer pressure from within their social circles. The 38% identification tracks with research from the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology, which found similar levels among elite colleges. The researcher on that project, Eric Kaufman, noted in comments to the College Fix that his research has found sexual behavior has not kept pace with the identification. In other words, bisexual identification outstrips bisexual sexual activity. If this was about people feeling able to come out, then we should have seen these two trends rise together, he told the College Fix. What we find instead is that identity is rising much faster than behavior, indicating that people with occasional rather than sustained feelings of attraction to the opposite sex are increasingly identifying as LGBT. Coming out as not heterosexual is trendy and wins social plaudits. But the notion that social pressure plays a role in LGBT identification is only controversial because the group is a sacred cow. However, the idea that peer pressure plays a role in our behaviors and lifestyles is acknowledged in other less controversial areas. It follows then that if teenagers can pressure each other to partake in some actions, they can encourage them to identify as LGBT as well. For example, the American Lung Association says that marketing, pressure from friends, and seeing their parents smoke cigarettes can contribute to higher rates of smoking. Peer relationships are also linked to alcohol abuse and drug use. On the positive side, peer support groups can be helpful in weight loss and paying off debt. Click here to read more from Restoring America. Social pressure is encouraging at least some people to identify as gay, bisexual, or transgender, and the Brown University survey is further evidence of that theory. Matt Lamb is a contributor to the Washington Examiner's Beltway Confidential blog. He is an associate editor for the College Fix and has previously worked for Students for Life of America and Turning Point USA. Tags: Beltway Confidential, Opinion, Blog Contributors, College, LGBT, Opinion.
All right, so upon hearing this, I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. And I was immediately skeptical because nationally, the amount of people proclaiming, like the rise in amount of people who identify as LGBTQ nationally reported as only increased by like 1.4%. So this is really, really strange. At first, I wonder about the Washington Examiner. I'm like, is this a legitimate news source? So we have this. I found these fact checkers, and well, according to All Sides, it ranks it as right-leaning news publication. It's got a 40.9% right-leaning bias, and Politifact scores it as half true. Like it spreads some lies, but that's not really very intriguing. So one of the things that I also wanted to investigate was Matt Lamb. Well, here's his social media profile, or his Twitter profile, and scrolling through here, there's a lot of definitely Catholic-based. He does a lot of, you have anti-Semitism here. He does a lot of anti-LGBTQ posts. There was another post that I found somewhere in here that was yeah, definitely like anti-left, anti-LGBTQ, anti-democrat, and like that doesn't say that his news reporting is wrong, but it does suggest a strong inkling of bias, I would say. There's a reason there to be biased. So there's other things though that I found, that because I really got curious about this, and I wanted to see like other things that what they have to say about this. One of the things that I found, though, before I get on to another news article, is possibly one of the reasons why this might possibly be is due to this right here. Is well, and it's not specifically this, but this is for Yale. There's one for Brown though. Hold on, that I really want to find. But this editor's note, why they call Yale the gay Ivy League. Yale is widely known as the gay Ivy since at least 1987. That this really isn't all that shocking to see such a spike once you realize that, and I have it here somewhere, I just gotta find it. It's a mess, I know, and I apologize, it's such a mess, but it is a mess. So Brown, here it is. Brown has this, and it's, when you Google about LGBTQ, Brown University, this is one of the first things that pops up. They have an LGBTQ center, and it says, did you know that the LGBTQ center has moved to a new home? While we've been incredibly grateful for our previous space campus, but they have a giant welcome committee where they actually promote themselves as being sort of a like very welcoming safe haven for LGBTQ people. So there would be a very, very, very good reason to see a very high increase in LGBTQ people at Brown, considering they do this right here. I mean, LGBTQ plus Community Impact Awards. Just throwing that out there. I'm not even finished yet, though. That's the thing. So you have that, and then on top of that, there is this Washington Post that I found. So in the Washington Post ad, which we're going to go over. So here's the Washington Post article about it by Alex Oliveira. It says nearly 40% of students at Brown University identify as LGBTQ+, doubling the share from 2010. The other thing, that was the reason why I have the Yale thing. In the Yale thing, it says that that colleges did not start getting any kind of, they did not start taking statistics and data on these demographics until 1987, and That's just for LGBT. So the QIA plus stuff, they weren't even looking at that until like probably recently, fairly recently. So at least 2010 that we know of, but they weren't taking they weren't taking statistics and data about anything beyond LGBT. They didn't do any QIA plus stuff until at least we know 2010, but they haven't even been collecting. They've only been collecting, like, these Ivy League universities didn't start even collecting data on LGBTQ or not Q, but just LGBT attendance since 1987. That's it. They really haven't been keeping data on that for very long. Anyway, so back to this New York Post. So the number of Brown University students identifying as LGBTQ has doubled since 2010, according to a new poll from the university's student paper. About 38% of students at the Ivy League school identified as either homosexual, bisexual, queer, asexual, pansexual, questioning, or other, more than 5 times the national rate for adults not identifying as straight. A similar poll conducted at the school just over 10 years ago found that 14% of the student body identified as being part of the LGBTQ community. The poll was conducted by the Brown Daily Herald, an independent student newspaper at the Rhode Island school, and released in June as part of a Pride Month special issue. It is unclear how many students were polled in the survey, going back to that Yale Alumni magazine stating that they didn't even take statistics until 1987, let alone we don't really know when they started counting Q+. But here's so change of sexual orientation between fall 2010 and spring 2023. Now, here's the thing. So heterosexuality down 25.2%. Homosexuality has only increased 26%. This is where we see a real spike. Bisexual, you keep in mind, this is between 2010 and 2023. So that's over 10 years. That's 13 years. But in 13 years, bisexual has increased by 232%. Now, that's not really surprising to me on the bisexual. Bisexual is really quite a spectrum. Like, you could have like 100% heterosexual, 100% homosexual, and then right in the middle between 100% on both ends, you have 50-50 bisexual. So they have just as much inkling towards women as they do men. But you have variations of that. You can have somebody who's bisexual that's all the way over here at like 99% heterosexual and only 1% bisexual. You get what I'm saying. It's bisexuality is a spectrum, so this really isn't surprising. I would be willing to bet there's quite a great deal of people that fall on a bisexual spectrum. That's something they don't act on because, they're 99% heterosexual or 99% homosexual, and they might have had like a thought here and there. So that really isn't surprising that bisexuality increases. The one that really, really strikingly increased is this one, those that identify as other. That's gone up 793%. But what does other even imply? We don't know. It's not specified. So they don't identify as heterosexual. They don't identify as homosexual. They don't identify as bisexual. Other could be trans. It could be non-binary. It could be queer. It could be asexual. It could mean a lot of different things that may not even necessarily be something you relate to being homosexual, bisexual, or trans. Really. Like, you can be non-binary and be heterosexual, essentially, or bisexual. So the other and the bisexual, that's not really surprising to me, especially that, you know, we're supposedly heading in a society's heading in a direction that's more accepting, although I have great doubts about that. I have something that summarizes this up in a coherent way. So sorry if it's rambled right now, but I'm going somewhere. It makes sense. And yes, that first article that I read, which was, oops, not that. The Washington Examiner. I have good reason to call this bullshit. So far we've heard like, oh, it's a social contagion. But never mind, we haven't been keeping data on this according to the Yale Alumni magazine. We have only been keeping track of LGBTQ attendance since 1987. And that doesn't necessarily mean we've been keeping track of LGBTQIA plus attendance since 1987, just LGBT since 1987. And then we have this, which Brown specifically has targeted advertising specifically for the LGBTQ community. This is like saying, you know, I went to a gay bar and I was shocked that 99% of the population identified as LGBTQ. You shouldn't be shocked about that. It's a gay bar. Of course it is. So basically, Brown is advertising itself as a safe haven for LGBTQ people. So why would it not see a spike or increase in LGBTQ? Why are we not seeing articles saying that all Ivy League universities? That's not what we're seeing. It's only Brown. So, you know, this is stuff that we really need to keep in mind. So, I keep hitting the wrong buttons, huh? Back to this. So, to go on with the New York Post article, the Herald could not be reached for comment, and the university declined to comment, citing the paper's independence from the school. About 7.2% of American adults identified as being non-heterosexual, according to a 2022 Gallup poll, up from 3.5% in 2012. Since the Herald first conducted a survey of sexual orientation on campus in 2010, so the Herald first conducted a survey of, they didn't even conduct a survey until 2010. So that tells me right there, we probably haven't even been keeping track of the full LGBTQ attendance rates until 2010. So we don't even know what these attendance rates were before that to say that they're up significantly since, let's say, 1972. We don't know. Brown students identifying as lesbian and gay dropped by more than half, from 46 to 22%. So that's interesting. So gay and lesbian identifying people has dropped by more than half at Brown, from 46% to 22%. It's actually gone down. About 19% of that group were college-age members of Gen Z. The number of students identifying with other groups, however, soared. And this is what I was talking about. Bisexual students increased by 232%, and other LGBTQ plus groups rose by a collective 793%. And see, we don't know what do they mean by other. Of the LGBTQ plus respondents, the most common orientation was bisexual at 53.7%. And again, I'm not surprised by bisexual. Josephine, a member of the class of 25, told the Herald she thought those numbers were driven by broadening social norms in recent years. Queer people haven't been able to be open in their identifications for that long, so it's exciting that the numbers are growing and that the queer people are able to be open, in particular at Brown. Remember, Brown specifically has targeted advertising towards LGBTQ people as a safe haven. Josephine said the Herald's own poll question... that was just... Never, I didn't even say that. So the Herald's own poll question options over the years mirrored that viewpoint. So sexual orientation of Brown students between fall of 2010 and spring of 2023. Here's heterosexual. That's pretty big. Homosexual, bisexual, other. So, I mean, here we have heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, queer, pansexual, asexual, and questioning. So other is not really explained. I'm assuming other is probably a menagerie of people that... a menagerie of different things within the non-binary spectrum. And this is the one that increased the largest by 793%, is this other. But still, heterosexuals make up the largest percent. It's still LGBTQ plus people are still the minority in totality. In 2010, students were given... But see, this is another thing I think is interesting. In the other post, the Washington Examiner, they didn't show these charts, but, instead they're like, no, it's a social trend. It's a social trend. Well, we don't even know what other is. So I think you're jumping to conclusions rather quick on that, to that person who, Mr. Matt, who wrote that article. So in 2010, students were given only heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, and other orientations to choose from. Just like I said, it wasn't until spring of 2022 that queer, pansexual, asexual, and questioning were added to the survey. Questioning might be other. So they didn't even measure anything that was QIA plus or questioning until 2022. So we don't have any data on QIA plus since before 2022. So going back to when we first started taking data on LGBT attendance, that started in 1987. We didn't start questioning on QIA plus until 2022. Some have argued that the soaring number of LGBTQ students at Brown is an example of a social contagion at a famously left-leaning school. There are two theories that greater tolerance is allowing more to come out of the closet, or Bill Maher's assertion that LGBT is trendy among some youth. Professor of political science at the University of London, Eric Kaufman, told The Fix in June. I think the second theory better fits the data and explains more of why the rise occurs. Citing data from the right-leaning Center for the Studies of Partnership and Ideology, Kaufman said LGBTQ plus identification has increased much more than sexual activity in those groups. Well, this is the thing that, I think a lot of heterosexual people don't seem to understand, is that you can not be sexually active and absolutely know 100% that you are bi, that you are homosexual. You can know these things. Somebody can be asexual, non-sexual, homo, romantic. Like you can be non-sexual and still be a homosexual. It's not just about sex. It's love, romance, and all that good stuff. So this, what is his name? Eric Kaufman says, if this was about people feeling able to come out, then we would have seen these two trends rise together. What we find instead is that identity is rising much faster than behavior, indicating that people with occasional... Well, I mean, part of the other was questioning, which is normal if you've never had sexual experience. Like, you might be questioning. And you know, you can be heterosexual without having had sex. You know, just saying. Where was I? Indicating the people occasional rather than sustained feelings of attraction to the opposite sex are increasingly identifying as LGBT. And that's not what it said. It didn't say they identified as LGBT. The one that grew the most was other and bisexual, not homosexual, not trans. Others include Sharita Gruberg of the LGBTQI plus Research and Communications Project with the Center for American Progress. Agree with... I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to pronounce that. That the environment of greater awareness that Gen Z was raised in has driven the numbers. Okay. So, the person who wrote this article was Alex Oliveira. Now, this guy is really professional because I did try to look at his social media. So it wasn't just Matt Lum that I tried to look at the social media. I tried to find Alex Riviera. Unfortunately, the only thing that Alex Riviera has is Airmail, which has all of his articles that he's done. So he's done a lot on just culture. Like, you know, you have music, food, drink, the Backcountry Hut Company, Amsterdam's e-bikes, streetcars named Desire, something about cigars, the Mile Cry Club, something about a kombucha kit, stoop slide, another article about a bike. I think this is an artist, a music artist. An article about the Wampler guitar pedal, music, culture, playlists, film and television. He doesn't really say anything suggestive of any political leanings, and I think that this is, you know, the sign of somebody who is fairly good at what they do in journalism, that, you know, they're trying to be unbiased and report the truth as much as possible, and be as you know, hold true journalistic integrity. I think that's what this means, because I can't find any Twitter, any Facebook, anything on this guy other than this Airmail, which just shows all the articles that he's ever written under one account. That's it. That's all I can find. That's seriously all. I can't find any Facebook, nothing. Just this. That's it. Okay, so I've gone over. Let's see what I've gone over Alex Oliveira, who wrote the Brown University report, which we ran. I told you the New York Post Brown University report written by him. I do have, I have a link to a Google search for when did the students of Ivy League universities start taking stats on LGBTQ status, especially queer and other. And that's where I ran into that Yale alumni. And as we found out, according to the Yale alumni and what we've learned, so LGBT attendance wasn't measured until 1987, and then we didn't even start measuring the QIA plus people until 2022. So we went over that. We went over Matt Lum. We've established, okay, this guy is Catholic. He doesn't like gay people. One of his pinned tweet, when people ask me, here, let me show it. When people ask me if I'm a doctor, Matt's educational background is in Catholic studies and political science, not medicine. Okay, so we know he's got ties to Catholicism. We know that he doesn't like the Democrats. We know that he doesn't like LGBTQ people. We know that he doesn't like Jewish people. With this right here, here, I can show. Jewish group calls for removal of law school dean over students' anti-Israel speech. Sure, whatever. I'm not even going to get into that. I'm not going to even talk about. I don't really have a stance on that. I'm not going to take one. Definitely pro-conservative. I mean, yeah, so we've gone over that. We've read his article from the Washington Examiner. We've gone over the Washington Examiner's fact check through Politifact. They're half true. They got to check. I haven't looked at it. Yeah. So, and that I also used the all sides. They don't really say if it's. They don't really do fact check. They just say like political leanings. It says lean right, but doesn't say like far right. It's just lean right. And says what a lean right rating means. Sources with all sides media bias rating of lean right display media bias in ways that moderately align with conservative, traditional libertarian, or right-wing thought and or policy agendas. A lean right bias is a moderately conservative rating on the political spectrum. So that's what it had to say. Then I showed the LGBTQ Center, the Community Impact Awards, their huge welcome mat for LGBTQ people, which is really quite amazing, and it's really cool to look through all the things that they provide for LGBTQ people, which this alone, I'll show you this again, this alone would impact the amount of attendees, like LGBTQIA plus attendees, that would be going to Brown University when they have this. I mean, they're basically saying, come here. You know, we are totally going to protect your rights, liberties, and freedoms. You know, we're going to do that for you. We're going to help you in any way that we can. We're not going to say, oh, you're trans, you can't present as trans in our hallways, you can't, you know, blah, 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 blah. Like, oh my God, you're holding hands with your boyfriend and you kissed in the hallway, you're suspended. You know, they're saying, we're not going to do that. You know, we're going to let you be yourself. You know, this would be, if you were LGBTQ, that would be a good reason to go. Like, it's an Ivy League university and they're not going to be rude to you. So that's a good reason by itself why their percentage goes up. So, in essence, there was somebody that posted this in something about this article in a subreddit, and they said the title is 38% of Brown University students that do not identify as straight stands at 5 times national rate. Which, like I said, the national rate, to my understanding, is that the increase of LGBTQ people is only increased nationally by 1.4%. The Herald Spring 2023 poll found that 38% of students not identifying as straight, over 5 times the national rate over the past decade. LGBTQ plus identification has increased across the nation, with especially sharp growth at Brown University. This Pride Month, the Herald reviewed data from its semesterly polls and spoke with current students to investigate how the LGBTQ plus community on campus has evolved over time. So this is going to be my sum up of what's happening here. Is my response to this was, I've been looking through this just recently. So far, it would seem that Brown blatantly advertises that they have an entire welcome center that they openly advertise on the internet. And it is openly advertising. If you find it on the Google search, it looks exactly like that. Like, hey, LGBTQ people, come here, you are welcome. And I leave the link to that Brown support for LGBTQ. I also have several charts where this data was collected, and most of it is an increase on a category labeled other. And then other category that's raised the most in second place was bisexual. There's a slight increase in the amount that are identifying as gay and trans, but this really isn't surprising on what we would expect to see in a society. Supposedly, I am thinking hate is alive and well in this country, and why this was published in the first place as a way of trying to create a hit piece on LGBTQ rights. But anyway, that society is becoming more tolerant and accepting, as well as the fact they are blatantly advertising that they welcome LGBTQ people with open arms, or as a safe place for LGBTQ people to be. Also, the original article I saw published on this was published as an opinion piece by a journalist named Matt Lamb, who has a lot of ties to a Catholic-based anti-left, anti-LGBTQ people and organizations on his social media. In this opinion piece, he brings up the idea that he thinks there is an environmental aspect to it that we need to investigate, and does not mention whatsoever the charts that were published in the New York Post by journalist Alex Oliveira. His social media is unknown, aside from a collection of his work, along with any known possible conflicts of interest. Most of his articles are related to other subject matter, such as huts built by people in wilderness and the other things that I showed you by Oliveira. Another thing I find interesting is that they do not include in any of the article is that they did not start really collecting data on LGBT, just LGBT, let alone any other identification, until the mid-1980s, according to the Yale feature Alumni magazine editor's note, which I left the link to that I showed you in this video. So this is not a statistic that they have really been keeping track very well for a long time, and now they are, and we, just as I read, I didn't read that before, that they didn't even start tracking the QIA plus people until 2022. And now they're recognizing other identifications beyond LGBT, and now those that may just simply identify as non-binary or even asexual or aromanticism. So again, in this case, we would expect to see increase in taking statistics on a group of people that generally wasn't before. And then I left the rest of the links. And I will leave the links in the description of this video. But I really wanted to jump on this before it spreads its way around the internet and becomes a huge block of fuckery. Because they see things like that. There's this really weird notion that, like, there was a poll that was taken on Americans on how much percentage increase of people identifying as LGBTQ, and like pretty much every group gets it wrong every time. Like, I think the highest estimates are like 20-30% as a nation, for the nation as a whole, and the lowest estimate is 4%. And the reality is it's only 1.4%. That's it. You know, like, LGBTQ people are a genuine minority. Like, genuinely, I'm a minority group. We live in a heterosexual world. We do. You know, but I just wanted to because it's dangerous when somebody looks at a statistic like that, like Brown University, and it's just Brown University. It's not like we're saying every Ivy League university across the United States, or every high school across the United States, or like just this, like they're not coming out saying the overall society across the United States has a 38% increase of people identifying as LGBTQ, and then try to make that sound like that this is some kind of learned behavioral thing, that it's environmental and not nature. You know, like they're making the nurture argument, not the nature argument, and when in reality is that we're now since 2022, we're starting to track a demographic of people we didn't previously track. Society's also becoming more accepting, so it's easier for people to come out. The other aspect is you have this other, you know, which could be, as I put it, non-binary, asexual, or aromanticism. So, and on top of that, another reason why you would see such a high increase at Brown University is they have pretty much an open door welcome party for LGBTQ people. In fact, some people are mentioning that in this thread in the subreddit is, this person, I'm at the wrong university. Maybe I should go there, because they're less likely to face discrimination. So that's, and somebody points out too, and 0% transsexuals. Like, there's just no trans people there, it says, or they were omitted because this is only a study of who you are attracted to. Yeah, funny. But I think I've given plenty of reason why you would see a 38% increase at Brown University. Plenty of reason. And it's not even an increase of homosexuality. It's not even really that big of an increase of people who identify as trans. It's an increase predominantly of bisexual and others. Or in other, whatever other is, which would be QIA plus people. So that makes a difference. It really does. And also, I think this is why Matt Lum's article was biased and called an opinion piece, is that he was trying to make the correlation that because there was a 38% increase, that it's due to a social trend, or that it's a learned behavior, rather than all these other things that I've mentioned. These other things that I mentioned are a much higher probability of why Brown University specifically has a 38% increase. Yeah. So I thought that was really important to get out there, because I can just see it happening now, that people are going to try to throw out the statistic. And, especially people on the far right, people who really hate LGBTQ people and want our rights rolled back to where they were, like pretty much in the 1920s, some people the 1950s, some people the 1960s and 70s. So, I mean, people like Matt Walsh, he doesn't even want, Matt Walsh doesn't just argue that children shouldn't be like, they shouldn't go through gender care, like as far as being able to dress and act as the gender that they identify as, not even getting into puberty blockers. But Matt Walsh takes the stance that he doesn't even think somebody who's a grown adult that wants to transition should be able to transition. He doesn't even think that should happen. And so, like, I think statistics like this are used to be tilted, slanted, warped, presented in a biased manner to produce propaganda to try and make the claim that sexual orientation is not involuntary, but that it is a learned behavior. And I'm just making this to say, no, that's not what this says. This has been presented very poorly. It's at Brown University specifically, probably Yale too, but Brown University specifically, they have a welcome mat thing for LGBTQ people, and also it's not that there's been a rise in trans or homosexual people. It's a rise in bisexual and other, which other, like I said, does not even necessarily mean trans identifying or bisexual or homosexual. Like I said, it could just be non-binary, asexual, or aromantic. So that could be what that means. Or questioning. That was a good one too. Questioning. And they didn't even take stats on this until 2022, and on LGBT people in general. They've only been taking stats on that since 1987. So don't let people use this to try and make that argument. That's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's hate, it's propaganda to try and use it to convince people to roll back LGBTQ people's rights, and it's irritating, and that's why I'm making the video, is to, like, if you come across this, to my LGBTQ allies out there, you can refer them to this video, or I've made the talking points for you, so you know, like, if they bring up this article, you know straight away there's going to be a lot of information that they're leaving out about this situation. Don't let them say that it has anything to do with environment and social trends, because it doesn't. The only social trend is that we've actually started keeping records on a demographic that we didn't before, and that Brown University has an open door policy with LGBTQIA plus people, and that society is becoming more accepting, supposedly. But like I said, I think pieces like this are produced as hit pieces to make that not happen, so that we're not as accepting as we would like to be, and ultimately seeking equality with straight people. And I mean equality, I mean equal. If straight people can do it, then gay people can do it. LGBTQ people. That's equality. That's equality. Anyway, yeah, like, I'll have links in the description. Like, share, subscribe, and comment. And with that, I'm out.